Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. And up next, we tackle flow, what it is and how to achieve it, and what that has to do with runners. After that, World of Running updates about the BAA half, Lizzie Bird, and more. Remember to submit your questions if you have them, so that we can answer them. We do that at the end of every month, end of month Q&A episode, which is everyone's favorite episode. And we only can do that if you ask questions. And so submit them at AtoZrunning.com/question. Any question about running, training, running nutrition, shoes, apparel, gear, like the stuff that you're thinking about as a runner, and ask away. And we'll do our best to provide helpful, practical, and productive answers.
If you like to combine festive experiences with running, you might want to check out the Whoville 5K in Michigan. And it's on December 11th in the afternoon, and there's also a kids race. There's a 5K and a kids race.
There's that, and proceeds go to the Rapid Runners, which is part of the Down Syndrome Association of West Michigan, and a recent development that they're growing there, which is really cool. Testimonial from one of their participants,
who's actually a friend of mine,
who happens to be a friend of ours.
Yeah.
And she said this being the first time in her life that she's motivated to be active, which is really cool.
Yep.
So because proceeds go there, and because it's festive and fun, and because of all the other good reasons, and you can get $5 off your registration, you should definitely sign up.
Yeah.
You can get $5 off registration with code ATOZ5. That's ATOZ5, the number 5. And that'll get you $5 off at their run sign up page. And we've got a link to that on the episode here if you don't know how to find it. But also, just thought we should mention, because, you know, it is festive and fun, that they developed their very own promotional jingle. Well, it's not a jingle. It's a Seuss-like poem. And I thought I ought to read that to you on air.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun.
Why wouldn't I? Because these things are fun. So in my best Seuss imitation narrator voice, here's Josh Modert's own Whoville race promotion. Every Who down in Whoville is busy preparing for the biggest of days, the most merry of merry. The long years apart now come to an end, and Whoville returns like a long-lost old friend. Any Who who's any Who will be there with cookies and costumes, hot cocoa to spare. The mayor, the missus, some things, and a cat. A merry round man in a funny red hat. Small Whos will be racing as fast as they can, like big Whos can trot too through this merry Who land. But be wary, we say, as you roam through our home, there's another out there who lives all alone. For some reason this season it brings him no glee. His heart's just too small, he's a mean one, you see. After cold winter dashing, and when you return, there'll be prizes the zaniest looking can earn. There'll be feasting and singing and selfies galore. Perhaps an old heart grows a few sizes more. So hurry, dear friend, sign now, get a hat. All proceeds proceeding are charitable, how about that? And if fam-friendly fun running is something you wish again, join the Whovilliest 5K in all of Who, Michigan.
Oh, I love that, Josh. That was awesome.
Well done. Well done.
Very
What
good.
The best promo ever written.
Okay,
for
we'll
an event.
also publish that with the link to the website to sign up. So even if you're not in Michigan, I know a lot of you are from all over the world. I hope you enjoyed that poem. That was really fun, and you might be getting into the holiday spirit yourself. I think I've mentioned before that during December, I wear a Santa hat on most of my runs. So,
and jingle bells.
yeah, let us know how you like to get in the holiday spirit during this time of year. We'd love to hear from you.
That is that. If you want to sign up, you get $5 off when you use code ATOZ5. ATOZ5 for $5 off.
Now let's get on to our main topic. What is flow? That's our main topic today, and I
thought
feel
you were
like
asking me. I was like, oh.
well, we are going to try to break down what others have said that flow is, but it is a pretty difficult thing to nail down as far as a definition.
It is that, and I think the reason why is because people are hesitant when they're defining these kinds of concepts to commit to a single means of experiencing something like this, because the point is that there's not one particular way someone might experience what they call flow. And so we'll get to that a bit. But I think for you to know why we're doing this and what we're going to try to accomplish by sharing this topic, first, we read the book, or at least most parts of the book, and not necessarily every single word. This is the way I read books. I don't read every single word of the book. The initial
True
first
confessions.
time.
Oh my goodness.
I read the parts and pieces of it that I'm trying to get like the gist of it, and then after I get the gist of it, then I like try to figure out, okay, so what are some things that I'm really interested in knowing about?
He does actually read it. Look at he
so
has all his notes.
Yeah, I got my stickies and I'll read from it. In fact,
so he
to you
reads
a couple of
it
times
and then reads it again, and that gives him more of a framework to put the information.
I use the Dave Stewart Jr. method.
Okay.
You spend
There's
1
a
hour.
method.
You
All right.
spend 1 hour getting as much from a book as you can in that 1 hour, and then you set it aside. And then you develop specific questions you want to answer, and you go back to the book and read various parts of it to answer those questions. And over time, you develop a full understanding of the text. Anyway, okay, so in fact it is, but it's because we're busy people. Enjoyable. We don't all have time to read every single word of every book we want to read. Okay, so here's the point. We're going to try to give you what we feel is the most intimate connection between the idea and how runners experience these concepts.
Yeah.
And most importantly, why it is difficult for so many to experience this kind of experience.
Sure.
And try to see if we can fill some gaps.
Right. And see how we can maybe get the benefits of this flow state, as it is called. According to Europe's Journal of Psychology, flow corresponds to a state of optimal experience and maximal concentration. When people act at the peak of their capacity, it may lead to high levels of performance, creativity, and pleasure. Encompassing specifics of various domains, a large variety of enjoyable human activities share the same flow characteristics. Yep,
right.
So that's what Europe's Journal of Psychology says. And they also say it's a fulfilling, absorbing experience of merging action and awareness.
I like that statement. Okay, so let's dwell on that for a moment. Because with all the complexities of all the things people have written about the topic, it is highly nuanced. And it like takes, in that example, it takes like 2 paragraphs to define as a concept in almost every instance where you see people trying to define it. But at the core, the concept we're trying to get at here is this idea of this experience that absorbs us, fulfills us, and involves, in order for that to be the case, involves a combination of our awareness and our activity, our action. Okay, so the flow state then is something that experiences that concept.
Have you experienced flow before, do you think?
I don't know. This is part of the challenge, right? Because I personally, I think that I am likely to find it easy to experience flow state because I also am very prone to immediacy in the things that I do. So like, for instance, when I do laundry, unless I'm listening to a podcast or a book while I'm doing it, when I do laundry, I am very aware of the laundry that I'm doing and thinking about the task of doing the laundry. Even something as simple as like folding a shirt. I'm thinking about how best can I fold this shirt? How well can I do it? And how much I enjoy the satisfaction of a well-folded shirt.
And so on a different note, how I have thought that I have experienced flow is very different than that.
Yes, exactly.
And because we're going to get into some of these specifics, but the automation of running and how we have practiced the same movement over and over, it becomes less self-conscious for me. So I am enjoying running without thinking about anything, and I'm just experiencing it. And I don't think that I'm aware in the sense of like each breath. I'm not heightened in my awareness as it's described for many activities. For me, it manifests maybe a little differently, where I am just running and like I have this time warp sense and I feel completely in the moment. And I guess that is, where my body and experience merge, because I feel the automatic feeling of the run, and it feels so natural and freeing to me. So that's
what's your mind doing during that time?
That's what I can't describe.
Exactly.
To you.
Yeah.
That's what I can't articulate.
So you're not like daydreaming. Just
no, I'm like I do that a lot on my runs. I daydream a lot and think a lot of my runs. But what I think is being described as flow state, I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm just in the experience, and it's not, my mind isn't wandering. I'm just doing.
So you see the challenge here. We're deliberately trying to describe specific experiences because it helps get at the core of why this is a difficult concept. And so at its fundament, the idea has to be deliberate to truly be iterative. So if I want to experience a flow state on purpose, then I have to be deliberate about the things that provide the conditions for a flow state. And that's what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the author of the book Flow, that's what he's describing. At its core, what we need to achieve is we want this to be a deliberate thing. We want to be able to have what he calls a controlled, we want to control the mental state that produces flow. And so here's kind of the essence of it in that sense. To be deliberate, we have to have a concept of goals or intent that then addresses challenges and skills, and there's a balance between the two. And in doing that we're experiencing feedback. So the experience itself is we're attending to the information we're getting from it and doing something with that feedback, adjusting or responding to it in some capacity. That our concentration is, as Andy's describing, our concentration is thorough and very much isolated. And so we're not thinking, our mind is not wandering. We're not thinking about our problems, our fears, or our worries. We're just thinking about the task as we're engaging with it. And then also that there's a reduction in self-consciousness, which is, so I'm thinking about the thing, not how other people are seeing me doing the thing, or how my results might reflect on others' opinions or on my place in the world, some of that kind of stuff. And then ultimately, so with all of that, it's producing a gratification in the activity itself, not in the potential rewards or results of the activity.
And this is where the Europe's Journal of Psychology did have a diversion. It says that it very well could be that, but also there are some performers who experience that with an audience. So there are some people that are not, there are other participants, but like it still is individual, but they are aware of themselves and others, and they can still find what they're calling this flow state. Again, such a hard thing to...
Well, no, but this is important because Csikszentmihalyi even says in that description that feedback is important, and the audience is a piece of potential feedback. And so it's not so much that I am not aware of those types of things. It's more that it's not an awareness that makes me self-conscious. It's an awareness that is a piece of the experience.
Oh, that makes sense.
I'm aware of how that is. So, a comedian in a flow state is very aware of the audience because the comedian is responding to the audience, to that feedback. And so this is where, the challenge is in terms of then how can I take these concepts and turn them into deliberate action? That's what we want to try to produce here as we're examining it. So let's look a little bit more thoroughly into those ingredients. I want to take those four very quickly and just give you the direct words from the author in terms of what these things, these parts then are. And this is, as Csikszentmihalyi describes, this is like the rules for an autonomic. See here, let me pull the book, right? Because I'm gonna do this. I know, but autotelic. It's telos. So autotelic self. Okay, so which is auto is like self, and telic is like purpose, logic, goals. So autotelic self is like a self-actualization, essentially. And so the four rules, essentially, to producing that are first, setting goals, but then within the setting of goals, we're aware of challenges, and this is the key. Like, you're aware of challenges as well as your skills, and what skills are needed to address the challenges, and whether there's a gap. Do I have the skills to achieve the challenges? So then feedback is important, because the feedback is what's telling me if it's, in fact, happening. So setting goals is complex. It's not just the goals themselves. And then the next layer is immersion in the activity. And the quote is, concentration is so intense that there's no attention left over to think about anything irrelevant or to worry about problems. So then what that means is it's not that I'm not aware of like the audience, or it's not that I'm not aware of the people around me or how my foot is feeling when it's hurting. It's that my awareness is of only the relevant things. And I'm not thinking of them in terms of like worry and anxiety. I'm thinking of them in terms of that's feedback telling me about what I should be doing or how I should be doing things. Okay, so that's a nuance. It's challenging. The third layer then is attention to what is happening, which is the large-scale attention. Self-consciousness disappears, this is the quote, and the sense of time becomes distorted. And that time distortion piece comes up a lot. He's right. We'll talk more about that.
I feel like I can resonate with that element of it.
Yeah, because what it is I don't have to be aware of the passing of time. Now, this is funny for runners, and I'm going to come back to it, but I don't have to be aware of the passing of time because that's not relevant. That's not one of those relevant awarenesses, unless it's a piece in the feedback, in which case, it could be. So
I wonder, this is just a
Go
random
ahead.
thought. I love to give my random thoughts, but I apologize for it. Have you ever finished a race and you're like, where did that time go? Like, I don't even remember running the race. I don't know if
a race?
Yeah, like a race. Like I will run a race and I'll finish and I won't remember the race.
That's very interesting.
This happens to me more than occasionally.
Oxygen debt, perhaps?
I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if I'm so immersed in the moment. People will talk about like courses and things. I don't remember them.
Well,
even one that I've run, like I'll run, in college or in high school, I'll run like a same course like 5 times. I won't know the course. I am just completely taken with what I'm doing in that moment.
So this is good. This is the thing I was alluding to a moment ago, and I was going to bring it up more later, but since you're saying it now, being aware of the passage of time for a runner is in fact one of those irrelevant details, because the only thing that's relevant to a runner who's trying to optimize their experience is whether or not they are giving the degree of effort that they should in the moment to best achieve the desired result at the end, right? So all I have to be aware of as a runner fundamentally is how I'm feeling as the feedback response to the effort I'm giving.
Well, but you do have the feedback to gauge it. So like, okay, I'm at mile 22. I've got more to get.
The distance
I
matters.
need to know.
I'm just saying the time matters. The passage of time is one of those that's not relevant to that. So how much you have left is relevant. If you're using time to measure that, then it is. If you're using distance to measure that, then time isn't, if that makes sense. Now, of course, I'm intentionally being extreme in that's not really the way most people are going to do this thing. But in that sense, so your description, I don't remember the course you said. For me, that's never happened where I don't remember the course. And there's one reason in particular, because I often make wrong turns. And so I have to be aware of the course as I'm running it. And if I'm not, chances are I'm going to make a wrong turn. I do it frequently. And so as a result of that, I am deliberately aware of the course. Now, if you're in a race scenario where all you have to do is follow someone in front of you or follow a thing that's guiding you, whatever that thing is,
pacemaker,
or like a well-painted course that, the lines are obvious and such, then in fact it is very possible that you can shut off the course awareness, and that's one of those irrelevant things.
I'm not leading most races, so I usually have someone
I'm
to
not
follow.
saying I'm doing that when I'm leading. I'm doing that no matter whether I'm leading or not. So this is good. This is really interesting, because what it comes to is if those are the three steps, and then we have the ultimate result, which is enjoying the immediate experience. That's the outcome. And the quote here from Csikszentmihalyi is, an activity that is so gratifying that people are willing to do it for its own sake. So that if we say, why is this worth thinking about? Why is this worth pursuing? Because at its core, we could all say that's worthwhile. If that's in fact a result of some of these things, as a runner in the running that I'm pursuing, it's worthwhile to say, I would love to be able to enjoy running for its own sake and need nothing else. I would love to not need the race or not need the results or not need the goals and outcomes. Now, as we learn from reading these steps, the goals and outcomes, in fact, are a piece of
the challenge,
producing
the challenge
the flow.
itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The challenge
so it's
itself.
all there. It's all part of it. One note here, because this is what I think is going to help make sense of some of these things. Csikszentmihalyi writes about certain activities are in fact pre-optimized for a flow experience deliberately. And whether people knew this when they designed the activities or they just knew that these were things that help produce a good experience, who knows? But this is where I think some examples are going to help fuel this, and then just seeing how this is ever present in certain aspects of life. So good examples here. Making music, for some. Rock climbing, dancing, sailing, chess, and on and on. Okay, so those are all very different realms of a different type of experience, but they can all be optimized. Here's why. What makes these activities conducive to flow is that they were designed to make optimal experience easier to achieve. They have rules that require the learning of skills. They set up goals. They provide feedback, and they make control possible. They facilitate concentration and involvement by making the activity as distinct as possible from the so-called paramount reality of everyday existence. So what it is doing is the activity that lends itself to such a thing is creating the parameters that we need, as described by those points earlier. The goals are preordained. You don't have to decide what the goal is when you're playing a basketball game. It's given to you. Your goal is to score points and win, or stop the opponent from scoring their points. So you get the point then. Now we look at life and we say, yeah, now I see why some things it's so easy to become unintentionally consumed in certain kinds of activities, healthy or otherwise, because they have those types of things in place already.
And we're going to talk about how runners can be challenged to get in flow state later on. So keep that in your noggin.
Coming
momentarily. Now, in Europe's Journal of Psychology, there was more of a structure that was given to this line
a little bit more
thinking.
Specified.
Right, because as they admitted in the article itself, in the research, it is so diverse how people experience it and how they come to it. But they wanted to put together some of this flow engine framework. And these are the ingredients that they say you need for flow. Balance between perceived challenges and perceived skills. So meaning you have to believe you can do it. And that's where you hear all the cliches of you can do it. You have to believe you can believe. That is because you must believe that you can accomplish your goals and have the skills there, or can come to have the skills.
Yeah, there's a nice chart for this that they use to create the visual where you've got challenges on the y-axis and you've got skills on the x. And where if your skill is too low, or rather your skill is too high for the challenge, it's boring. And so it's just not interesting because my skills are too high, it's not challenging enough. Where it's too challenging for my skills, then it's stressful. And so now I can't achieve the goal, and it is demotivating. So the medium between the two is where my skills and the challenge meet, where it's not boring and not stressful. That's the flow state.
Clear proximal goals. Or proximal goals.
Yep.
Immediate feedback, which we discussed.
Yep.
Intrinsic motivation. They had both extrinsic motivation and intrinsic, and how those differed for the flow state. Hyper focus, temporary loss of self-reflective awareness, distortion of time perception, feeling of control, and merging of action and awareness, and then attentional involvement.
Yeah, where your attention is directed into the thing. Yep.
So the flow state framework was developed because of the vagueness of the topic. So we talked about the skill challenge balance, and I think that's very difficult for runners because there is, like we said, there's no limit to your aerobic ceiling. We don't really know how good we can get in this sport. So sometimes we go 5 years down the road and we imagine what we might be able to do then. We need to have the proximal goals and immediate feedback that are going to support flow state, so we're not in a place of what Zach was saying on the chart of anxiety and demotivation.
And bookmark in your mind the skill challenge balance. We're going to come back to that in terms of why for running, that's a particularly unique obstacle. We'll come back to that in a moment.
Yeah. And the core processes for the cognitive are attention and motivation. And I thought this was something that was worth speaking of, because I think that we can utilize this concept with running, or understand it more clearly because we're runners. The automatic attention.
Yeah.
Which we have with running, right? Because we've practiced the same motion over and over and over. Implicit investment in the task. You're training all the time, right? You're not just showing up and then hoping to get in this flow state in a race. You've had practice. And there's executive attention, referring to explicit intervention of executive control, where in a race, we'll talk about with the runners what makes it difficult for us to get in flow state. But I'll give you a little spoiler alert. Pain and discomfort are things that our body usually says no to. And so as runners, we want to be able to receive the feedback, but also ultimately override that, knowing that we can continue to press and put pressure on during a race, even when we're uncomfortable. So that's where you have to have executive attention and exert that within a race.
Well, okay, so thinking about all of that in collective experience produces then that sense of, so you have the absorption in the activity, you have the task achievements, the fruits of your labors, and there's another piece here about the positive affect, which I'll just mention for a moment. That's one of the key considerations in Csikszentmihalyi's work, as well as certainly just about all the rest that we've read on the topic, which is that I'm doing this because the optimal experience, ideally, is something I enjoy. It's something that makes me happy. But a piece of that must be deliberate is that I'm deliberately happy. I'm deliberately enjoying the experience. And why that is key is because Csikszentmihalyi writes specifically about happiness. He's like, the thing that we find about happiness in research is that you can be happy and unhappy at the same time. So you can say, I am very happy and I am very unhappy. And how is that possible? It's because they're not mutually exclusive, meaning that happiness and unhappiness can come from different sources and both be present then. So we can then look at something like the experience and say, I'm going to choose to be happy about a certain aspect of the experience, and I'm not going to dwell on the thing that's unhappy about the experience, which could present be there. For example, when you run, it's oftentimes physically unpleasant, like it hurts sometimes. And at the same time, you can say, I'm enjoying this experience. I am happy right now, despite being highly physically uncomfortable. How is that possible? Well, because you're happy and unhappy at the same time. You're just choosing the happiness for your focus. Okay. So there's a lot there.
I like what verywellmind.com wrote about the topic. Imagine for a moment that you are running a race. Hey, I bet we can all do that. Your attention is focused on the movements of your body, the power of your muscles, the force of your lungs, and the feel of the street beneath your feet. You are living in the moment, utterly absorbed in the present activity. Time seems far away. You are tired, but you barely notice. Well, some of us notice more than others at different points of the race.
Yep.
This is an example of flow state. So this is not a running website, but this is like an example of a flow state, and running was used as part of that example. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that description of flow state by verywellmind.com.
So these things sound very nice, but they happen very rarely for most of us regularly. So the question becomes, in our mind, is why is this so hard to achieve? Now, in asking that, we have to assume, first of all, I am not of the opinion necessarily that this should be the thing we're all trying to aspire toward all the time. That's not necessarily the way we're trying to view the topic. I think in my mind, I'm unsettled yet as to whether that is indeed an aspirational goal for people in general or runners specifically. So I'm not going to make that argument. But what I am going to say is, if I want to achieve this, why is it hard to achieve it?
Yeah.
And so we've got some thoughts on that.
We do.
And Csikszentmihalyi had plenty of thoughts on that as well. Namely, and most importantly, because there are certain things about what we're trying to have present that are very close to a negative thing as well. So for instance, that feedback piece. Like I need to be aware of feedback, and yet the feedback might be giving me negative feedback. Yeah. And that's difficult to experience that. And so that's something that, you almost have to kind of like practice. Like I have to be familiar with experiencing negative feedback and what I'm going to do about that as I'm experiencing it.
Right. And that's the executive attention that we have to be able to put into practice. Yeah. And I do think that flow state is, in the instance of running, has to be highly cultivated compared to other experiences. Perhaps I'm making kind of a bold blanket statement there, because we need the automatic attention. We work on it neuromuscularly. We work on it to have good form and to train our systems that we don't even think about,
and routines and habits.
Yeah, routines and habits, and being able to use our fuel properly. There's all kinds of functions of our body that are tested in our version of flow state while we're running, right? So there's a lot going on there. So we have the automatic and then we have the executive attention, but the executive attention is what is most likely the difficult aspect that pulls us out of flow state.
Yeah,
so that's the negative thoughts, the poor feedback we're getting from our body or from others or from our watch, or maybe it's the wind, maybe it's all the variables of the day. So we have to be able to hyper focus, I think, more so than other activities or disciplines. And I think that makes running a more difficult place to find flow state, but also one that we can find extreme amounts of performance value. And I guess I can't promise that either, because
performance value is one of the things that can take us out of flow. Yeah,
that's true. But I'm saying like that it can be a place that we find optimum performance or optimal performance.
Yeah. Well, so that decision that you have to make, that's what the executive is about, is you have to make deliberate choices. And so you have to make those choices based off of feedback you're receiving. You have to make those choices based off of the goals that you have and whether the current experience is aligning to that. And that brings us to one of the comments I was saying earlier, which is that challenge skill gap piece. One of the reasons this is very hard for runners, and it's really important for us to be reflecting on this individually as runners, is because we often don't quantify skills that we need to develop to achieve our goals or meet the current challenges. And that is a shame on our sport, because there in fact are a great many skills that we need to be developing, more than just train hard, or more than just get fit, or more than just go run. And so as a consequence, we just don't know what they are. Like if I face some kind of obstacle or challenge, like I am not progressing as I desire, I am not achieving the goals that I wanted to achieve, can I look at that and say, what are the specific skills that I'm currently lacking? Most of us look at it instead and say, I need to just get fitter. I just need to run more or run faster or something like that. That's tough, because those things are not always things we can do. You can't always run more, because you get to a point where you're running enough. You don't need to run more. You can't always run faster, because as we've talked about, running faster oftentimes produces worse results if I'm running too fast too often or something like that. So I need to find out what the skills are and how to develop them. So that's part of what Andy is describing with some of the automatic side of it, is developing some of those things. But in terms of the executive, making the choices about, here's my current situation and what's happening, what are some things I can do? So that's difficult. That's one of the reasons why this is hard for runners. Now, in general, I think one of the most important contrasts is the tension between the idea of we're trying to be very self-aware and yet not be self-conscious. That is also hard. That's hard because self-consciousness is basically hyper self-awareness. And so what it becomes is, as the author describes in the book here, the self-consciousness that we're trying to avoid, or rather we're trying to just ignore, is how I am. It's the comparison game. How I am comparing myself in the context of against others, with others, or against myself against myself. So self-consciousness is most often happening in the comparison. Csikszentmihalyi says that for everyone, this is one of the most difficult things to overcome in terms of achieving this concept. And so we look at why that's difficult for us currently even more, because he wrote this book in 1990. They didn't have social media. They didn't have, the internet as a ubiquitous tool that everyone was using. And so this is a problem, because it's even worse than when he wrote this book, and he said it was the biggest obstacle then.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that? Because we already know that there are certain things that are making us more self-conscious, and we're intentionally welcoming that negative experience into our lives. And we're doing so willingly, frequently, and in an ongoing sense, constantly.
I think it's so interesting. As you're saying that, it comes up to me like the idea of shame, and how like a lot of times we're upset with ourselves for not achieving our proximal goals, like for the day, for a workout, because other people will see what we're doing. So then that element of shame is a hurdle for flow state, because it's negative. You're in a place of dissatisfaction. And so then it makes it more difficult to enjoy the task and to find yourself in a positive flow state. So I think that's an interesting feedback loop that sometimes we need to just close, like, okay, I'm going to not pay attention to this, or I'm going to, there's many methods, or I'm going to surround myself with these people, or, it's not meaning that you need to put yourself in a little hole so that you only have your own feedback. I'm not saying that, because I think others can be super encouraging. Actually, many of you have been very encouraging to us, so thank you. But I do think it is very important to know where this cycle is happening for us when running becomes a negative aspect of our life.
Yeah, and part of that is what's so tricky, because we don't want to be the perspective here isn't to isolate either, because that in fact is highly unhealthy. And Csikszentmihalyi writes a lot about how part of the importance of flow is participation in the activity at a broader level. So it's not that it's just what I'm doing right now myself, but it's like running in a bigger sense. And of course, we all know that to participate in running in a bigger sense in the most positive and productive way almost always involves participation in the running community in some capacity.
And I'll get personal real quick, because
well,
we're
you never
along
do
these.
that.
I never do that. I never share. I'm not an oversharer at all. Well, one of the ways that I have achieved flow state has been as a participant in a larger thing. So whether I'm in a race and I'm feeling the masses surrounding me and I feel taken, like I'm almost in a bird's eye, and I can feel that I'm part of this massive thing, and there's an excitement and a flow that can happen as you feel like you're like a river of people running down.
Literal flow.
Yeah. And there's other times that it will be like recently. Fall leaves on the ground. I see deer and I see squirrel, and I think, wow, all of creation is glorifying God by the things that they're doing. And for me, that's part of what brings me into this flow state, is feeling like I'm part of the whole world's song, so to speak. And I know I'm being really cheesy right now in the way that I'm describing this, but this is truly how I feel about it. And,
not as cheesy as he gets in the end of the book when he starts talking about the connection to the universe. And
no, but I feel that connection, and it makes me euphoric in a lot of ways. And I feel like that plays into some of my feelings about flow and how I've experienced it for myself.
Yeah, there's a reason, and so he even writes about this in the book, where it's true that many times historically throughout time, that cultures that have achieved flow at a broader and more consistent sense are almost always religious based. And the reason for that is because we assign a personal connection to this universal concept. And so like there's some kind of force behind this that I can intimately relate with. Like God. And so, yes, as you're describing that, that's throughout the writings as well. Now, the question becomes, when we're looking at that, for runners, like this is not happening very easily. And so I want that, I want to be able to do that. Like you described, going to these things, being with these people, but also being able to do that on my own and stuff. And it's still, I'm having a hard time. And so part of it is like, where are we getting some of these inputs from? And so we look at the feedback, and it's unstructured or it's unproductive. So I'm looking for feedback from the wrong places is one of the concerns. For example, if I'm trying to use the watch to be my feedback, but we all know that
you
the watch
knew he was going to say
is
that,
a very
didn't you?
fickle
You
thing.
knew it.
So that's a problem, right? Because what that's doing is that's telling me the example here. If I'm looking for the right challenge skill balance, the watch's feedback daily is bad for that, because it's not giving me a true picture of my current skill. It's giving me a glimpse of a moment that is a highly unstable moment, because so many things are influencing it, because the next moment can be so very different without changing anything except for some of those stimuli. So the productive feedback is valuable. So what kind of feedback is the most productive matters there. But then also this idea of I'm focusing on myself and not really thinking about the activity. When I think too much about that self-conscious piece, when I think too much about what I'm doing and not the thing that I'm participating in, it is harder to engage with that, like Andy was describing, kind of like going with the crowd in the, the big race experience. And so that's tricky, because we want to be self-aware, but we're not trying to be self-aware insofar as we lose sight of the activity. See why this is hard?
It is. It is.
And I did want to just mention, this is the last specific comment I wanted to make for runners, because we tend to, and I don't know that this is a fault, but it takes us out of, or it makes it harder to achieve this experience, this optimal experience we're describing. And it is, we look for or pursue or try to enjoy the associated facets with running, but not the thing itself. So I like to run to be with friends, or because I need some alone time, or because I want to get fit or be healthy. These are all good reasons to do these things. I'm not saying those are bad things. But if the reason I'm running is to do those things, it's a lot less likely that I will be able to find the running activity itself to produce the optimal experience. So without those things, I'm likely to view it as less enjoyable. So if I'm looking for running to be more enjoyable as an optimal experience inherently, those things can be a piece of that experience at times. But I'm trying to find a way to enjoy or find gratification in the activity itself.
Mm-hmm. And from the couple of professional athletes that I've discussed about flow very briefly, so I won't say their names in case I get their stories wrong, but I had a couple of them say that part of the way that they do this is they will run alone for some of their longer workouts, so that they can not only be focusing on the feedback of their body and make sure that they're able to run the appropriate harder efforts by themselves, but also to be able to get into this flow state and to be able to practice that, because it, like Zach said, we live in an age of distraction even more now than in the 90s when the book was written. There's overstimulation and there's immediate gratification. So if we're able to pull ourselves out of some of the distraction, then we can try to harness this flow state a little bit better. So I had two people in mind that we discussed on the podcast, little bits about flow. And so I think that was a good example. That's a good example of how to work on it for oneself, is maybe to schedule a few workouts or some long runs where you're able to really dial in, tune in. We call it being an intuitive runner. I think that's actually part of finding flow as well. I think that those can help complete one another as far as a running experience.
So it's treadmill season, or at least it's just about
tell
to
us
be.
that.
And one of the things that we have to keep in mind with something like this is running on the treadmill is not the same activity as running outside. It's a very different activity. And this is one of the reasons why many of us detest it more, or some like it. And there are many who enjoy the treadmill. I like it sometimes.
It's convenient.
Good book to read. So my point here, though, is one of the comments that Csikszentmihalyi specifically isolates is that we have to condition our attention. And so he was writing, again, in 1990, when he didn't have all the problems we have with attention. They certainly had problems, but they weren't as big. And so
not with attention.
Not with attention.
I think we're probably the worst humanity's been with attention.
He actually writes about, so what about people who have inherent difficulties with attention, like attention deficit things, or other kinds of conditional aspects that, it's not because I'm just distracted by something, but it's actually harder for me. Yes. So if that's the case, whether or not there's that's present for any of us, if that is the case in any people, it's also true that they can still condition their attention. You're starting in a harder place than someone else, maybe. But the point is we should be working on that anyway, because for all of us, we have instances where we're allowing our attention to be directed without deliberately directing it ourselves. And as a consequence, something like the treadmill comes up for my mind, because one of the things that's a problem with us with the treadmill is it's super boring, right? I just sit there and stare at the wall. And it's like, well, yeah, but what am I attending during that time? And can I enter my attention into something that is, in fact, a more gratifying thing? And of course, the answer is yes. But, it's hard to run for 2 hours in the same room and stale air, and your own stale air at that. So there's more to be said about that. But
I'm going to bring back Mario Mendoza's wisdom with that, and just having there be times that you do practice your focus. I think it's easier to run with music and podcasts. Like you might be listening to our podcast right now. But what Mario had suggested was for your easy stuff to listen to music or podcasts. But then when you have a steady state or a workout or a fartlek, you are intentionally training your focus.
Yeah, and that's important, because most of us want to try to distract ourselves from the pain as much as we can. So the harder or more painful the experience, the more we want to distract. And for the flow optimization to occur. That's the exact opposite of what we should be doing, though. We should be trying to enter into the experience even more, the more challenging it is.
My brother, I didn't know it at the time. I just thought he was absolutely bonkers. But he used to yell, Andy, get the pain. Love the pain.
Yeah, he's absolutely bonkers.
Go get the pain.
Though, so
and I remember in high school when he would yell that to me, I was like, I don't understand you. But he is a...
You're a high school girl and he's... Yeah.
I don't understand what you mean. That sounds masochistic. So anyway, I kind of am starting to understand what he means by that, being a marathoner, what he means by entering into that and responding to it and finding flow and focusing on those positives. So there's a lot that we can take away from this conversation about flow, as vague as it is. I believe that we've been able to discuss it. Hopefully you can let us know. Make it into a conversation that can be beneficial to us as runners to find that flow.
Indeed that. So now that we've solved your problem of creating the optimal experience and finding happiness, let's get on to the world of running. Hey, a quick update for A to Z runners. We had one. There's not a lot of racing going on this time of year, as it so happens, across the board. But we got some holiday stuff coming up. That'll be fun. But Dan O ran, finishing third in his age group at the Dirty Duel, which, you know, is
trail racing.
Trails.
That's why it's dirty.
Trails in the cold.
Yep.
So nice work, Dan O.
And the world of running the BAA half, the winners were, for the men's side, Jeffrey Koech in a time of 62:02. It was a rainy, blustery day, by the way. The women's winner was Viola Chepnagano in a time of 70:40. That's legit. Okay.
Well, in fact, though, it's kind of slow for that level of an event, and because of the day, it was both times. Both times. I'm not saying her specifically.
No.
The times in general.
Field, actually.
Yeah. So
there's
like
a lot of really
tough
tier
field, and yet
athletes.
times were slow. So that speaks to how difficult the day was.
Previous podcast guest Zuhair Talbi was third place to claim a podium spot with a time of 1:02:15.
Nice.
And then Tishom Bekoen. He's an Ethiopian-born, but American, but most recently got his U.S. citizenship this year.
Oh, yeah.
So we're glad to have him on representing USA with these speedy times here. He ran as 60:02 previously, and for this race ran 62:28 and was the top American in fourth place. Yep. And he's hanging with the leaders through 11 miles. And Erica Kemp, previous podcast guest, was the top American woman in seventh with a time of 72:13, which is excellent after battling some injury. She's been coming on strong the last few races she's been running. And then Molly Huddle returned from the birth of her child, running her first half marathon in a strong 12th place finish in time of 73:29.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun to see her back out doing it, getting
not
after
the
it.
most fun day to have to do it.
No, but she can do hard things. She's proven that.
Well,
actually, many of these runners have. So
next up this is interesting. So Lizzie Bird is the British steeplechase record holder. And as we like to do when we get a glimpse into athletes training and have an opportunity to comment for you on that, it's fun to find out kind of what these people are doing.
Yeah, yeah. She attributes her success, you're not surprised, to consistent training and not having injuries the past few years.
I'm not surprised because every time we ask a pro runner that question, that's the answer they give.
Yeah. She's built year over year in her volume. And I just wanted to say in her off season, we talked about last week what Zach recommends when you are putting together a week, what are the most important runs. And she said the exact same thing. So just giving some credibility.
Which was?
Medium long run and a long run. And she then will do like a tempo, steady, or a speed workout to keep her neuromuscular
exactly
strong.
What I said.
Exactly what you said. So I just wanted to
It's almost like they're all looking to me.
No, it's like we're looking
maybe we're
at what
all
works.
looking to the same source of things.
Yeah,
which is exactly
and
what we're doing.
if you care about knowing the framework for like her mileage, it's 50 to 60 miles per week in this winter off season, so to speak, before she gears up for her steeplechase season in the spring. Mm-hmm. Now, another piece of news, the U.S. Olympic Trials Marathon location was announced. It's going to be in Orlando, Florida.
Ah.
Yes.
Orlando in February 2024.
Mm-hmm.
It has the chance of being yet another super humid.
It could be super
and hot
humid.
race.
Florida often is. But the contrast here is that likely it will be very, very flat compared to Atlanta's super hilly course.
That would be nice.
So we could see fast times depending on what the weather is.
I mean, humidity takes a greater toll than hills. So
That's
if it's a humid day, anything can happen. Actually, I kind of like this.
Humid and hills, though, is probably one of the worst combinations.
Yeah. No, but I like, for races like this, I like it when it's not about who can run the fastest time, but who can like tough through a difficult thing more. Because the Olympics are never optimal conditions.
Doesn't seem to be, huh?
Summer Olympics, well, I guess it's not summer everywhere because if they ran them in Australia, that's winter for them and summer for us. But anyway, so most of the time they run the Olympics at a place where in July and August is very hot and humid. And so there's a reason why, in the USA trials, we think, it's not a bad idea to run on a humid day for the trials because that's what you need to be ready to do.
Mm-hmm. We do hope that they're fast enough, though, that we can be confident about the person being able to get the world standards, which have not been announced, but there is a lot of speculation that these times are going to be a lot faster than they have been.
Well, so yes, but keep in mind why they keep doing this. They're trying to stop people from using times. The Olympic Committee and the World Athletics Organization. They don't like time qualification. They want it to be based off of rankings in the world and your ranking within your country in the world rankings. And so they're pushing those kinds of like auto qualification standards, like time standards, harder and harder to minimize the impact that has on who's qualifying.
Mm-hmm. And I hope that my understanding is correct that if your country has 3 people who qualify within world standards, the country is able to send whomever they would like if they meet a certain time qualification.
Past. Yeah, we'll see if they do that.
So I don't know if that time will be the same as the really fast times that they're speculating. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see. There's so much unknown about that, but I do hope for us to be able to send the top 3, whoever they are, to the Olympics and not have it be one of those things like, okay, this person ran great this day, but they don't qualify.
Yeah.
So that's always sad.
I am not opposed to, I know the U.S., we've talked about this so many times, and I've gone back and forth. I've waffled myself, but to adopting a more of a hybrid thing where it says, like, whoever is the highest ranked American athlete in the event in the world, that person has an auto. They get passed through. You get to compete in the Olympics because you're the best ranked in our country in the world. And then the next 2 spots go to, the top 2 finishers. I'm not opposed to things like that. But I don't know that would actually make it for a better experience.
I don't know.
And I really like the trials dynamic.
The trials dynamic is really exciting, and it brings another level of sport awareness to the U.S., which we are trying to grow. That's why we have the World of Running segment on the show every week.
We're hoping that people actually care about these things.
And if you want to be reminded of the qualifying standards for the U.S. for the trials, it's 63 minutes for the half marathon for men, or the marathon time of 2:18.
That's a minute faster than it was in the previous Olympic cycle.
And then for women, you have to run a 72, which is a 1:12.
Half marathon. Yeah.
Half marathon. And then the marathon time is 2:37 flat.
Which is 8 minutes faster than it was in the previous marathon cycle. So as a consequence, Andy and I have been talking about this. As a consequence, you're seeing a lot of races now where a lot of people are dying hard who are like really talented runners because they are, 242, 243 marathoners who are trying to run 237 and have never run that fast before. And the point is, well, it's 2:37 or die because if I don't hit that time, I don't qualify. So I'm just going to run as long as I can at that pace, see what happens. Well, as you might guess, it doesn't always end well.
Yeah.
So it's producing a really tough, gritty race experience at the American development level right now, all over the place.
It is. It's causing some anxiety for some people.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's hard. But hard is not a bad thing.
No, and I think that
just got to raise your skills so your skills can meet the challenge.
Or we find satisfaction with other elements of our running experience and maybe find some more proximal goals in the meantime, even if we have an outlook for that kind of qualifying time later. So
speaking of satisfaction in your goals, we have refined our training plan builder so that now you can go to AtoZrunning.com/coaching and you can find a training plan button that says build it now, and all you got to do is enter some information like details about what you're training for, some of your past experiences, so we get a sense of what your training is like currently, and a couple of other things. And then we will review that information and build for you, our expert coaching team will build for you a custom training plan. Turnaround time is under 2 days. So you can get a training plan with nothing more than a 5-minute entry on a form in under 2 days, and it will be built for you to achieve those goals based off of your situation and needs. Look at that. Go to AtoZrunning.com/coaching to find out.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We're so glad that you've decided to listen to our show today. Please continue to interact and send your questions. We love it. We absolutely love the running community, and we're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.